We are part of the first group of countries that will receive an allocation of vaccines from COVAX. We have been advised that we should expect the vaccines in our country in the second quarter of 2021. We are also having parallel bilateral discussions with a number of vaccine manufacturers and will make further announcements once firm agreements are in place. As a country, we need to build a strong partnership between the government and business to augment the resources required in financing additional vaccines necessary to achieve herd immunity.
And later, the Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, gave an update. Let's take a listen.
The availability of this vaccine is actually a real boost in our fight against COVID-19. We were very pleased. We had said in the earlier press briefings that we were not at liberty to pronounce on the concrete issues in relation to the numbers and timing. But since we have been able to get a confirmation, we've been able to announce the first batch, which is the 1.5 million vaccines that are coming. It's not enough for all the health workers. It's still just the first batch that we are receiving. We're actually continuing to order more, and out of that, we'll be able to cover everyone. Now, the approach that we're going to take in the distribution or in the administration of the vaccine is that we'll be setting up centers where the health workers will be taken through. So we believe that by the time we'll have administered all of those dosages, it would be in such a way that we would be able to get additional doses to be able to give them the second dose. So the first 1.5 million, we should really be able to cover with that, but we will have been able to ensure that there are additional doses. So the ordering or the acquisition is going to be on an incremental basis based on the ability of the manufacturers to supply us. But we must know this is just a start. There are many, many more people that need to get the vaccines, and out of that process, we'll be able to make sure that those who need to get it will be able to get it.
Joining me now is Dr. Aslam Dasoo, Progressive Health Forum convener, as we continue unpacking the issue of vaccination in South Africa. Dr. Dasoo, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you were listening a little bit earlier on, but I was in conversation with Mr. Freeman Bengu from the Sonke Public Forum. And in that conversation, what was key and chief is just the level of mistrust that some South Africans have when it comes to government, especially in issues of health. And he cited in our conversation the Life Esidimeni debacle tragedy, really, that we had, saying that he felt that government was monopolizing this entire procurement process, was not being transparent enough. What are your thoughts on allegations such as this?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I must say I have a great deal of sympathy for the view that Freeman Bengu put forward. He's correct in all of his aversions, and there's a great deal of accountability that needs to come forth here. You know, he of course, I listened to his interview, and he's correct. Look, having at the best of times, having a weak government is a real problem. At the worst of times, such as during a pandemic, having a weak government is a catastrophic disaster, and we're experiencing this, unfortunately, at this time. The lack of transparency around this entire procurement of vaccine and the entire strategy for rolling out the vaccine engenders further mistrust. We are quite certain, and if you look at the Pfizer story that you've spoken about, the J&J story where they also contacted the government months ago and heard nothing back, tells a different story than what you are hearing from the government right now through its spin. They did not do anything material to acquire sufficient vaccine for us until the outcry grew huge at the end of last year. And the president then had to step up And it was due to his prestige and his authority that he was able to contact his Indian counterpart and acquire for us this 1.5 million vaccines. This has nothing to do with the efforts of any Department of Health approach. Now that we've secured that, what we find even more disturbing is that he has been sidelined. He is the only person, the president of the Republic, who can gather us all into a single national effort for this vaccination program. Yet, governments have to do something, and ours has set up another committee, a clone of the lockdown committee or this command council. So it's not engendering any further confidence that we are going to get to a credible vaccination program anytime soon.
Here's a question that I did ask Mr. Bengu as well, and I'm going to pose that question to you too. In the midst of negotiating with various stakeholders, there's Johnson & Johnson, there's Pfizer, the measures that COVAX are putting in place, there's Moderna. At what point does a government actually procure from one supplier or another, not knowing which is going to be the most efficient type of vaccination for their own particular situation?
Let's dispense with that approach that the government has taken about why it didn't engage. It is utter nonsense to suggest that vaccines which are undergoing trials right in our country as well, which are showing great probabilities of success, cannot be procured on a preemptive basis. Other countries have done it. What unique knowledge did we have that prevented us from doing so? It's a diversion. It has no basis, and it is an excuse. The fact of the matter is that we should have procured these vaccines a lot sooner, and we should have had a plan to roll them out. They've been caught napping. Let's just accept that. The idea that there's risk and you don't know whether the vaccine will work and whether we have the money for it, that's just smoke and mirrors. Please, we've been through this debate with them for a long time, and we are quite clear they could have done this many months ago.
Let's talk about the procurement. Let's talk about the procurement process and the monopolizing of that. We've seen the Western Cape saying that they want to procure their own vaccines. Just your thoughts on that and how perhaps the private sector should be or could be rallied into the procurement process as well.
Sure. I think there's two aspects to this. The reason there are other parties seeking to procure is because they have also experienced the deficiency of the state to procure sufficient vaccine. So they want to procure for themselves. Secondly, it's actually a very good idea in a society like ours that we use all available modalities, means, access to vaccine to get insufficient amount of vaccine into the country. There's only really one way to vaccinate people. So it's a national program. There's nothing secretive about that. The private sector can bring logistics, they can bring systems, they can even bring finance, as they have done to this. So there should be no impediment to their cooperating with us. But if a mining company or the mining sector wishes to procure vaccine either from the government or from private sources and vaccinate all of their employees and their families, why should we oppose that? That we have to get to herd immunity. How we get there quickly is not through a centralized secretive process that's only in the knowledge of a few people. That's an absurd way of doing things. And that's why we are saying that there needs to be an open, transparent process led by the president, not some secretive committee to get us to where we need to go.
Dr. Aslam Dasoo, thank you so much for your insight and your input this afternoon. That's Dr. Aslam Dasoo, Progressive Health Forum convener. And before that, we also spoke to Freeman Bengu from the Sonke Public Forum. Clearly, a lot of dissatisfaction coming from some sectors of society with how government has dealt with this issue of procurement. A lot of secrecy, saying that what we don't need is another committee, another panel, but clear, decisive leadership and forward planning. And that issue looks like will be taken to the courts by some of the NGOs.